Something was pouring from his mouth. He checked his sleeve. Blood? Blood. Blood. Crimson, copper-smelling blood. Blood. His blood. Blood. And bits of sick. Greetings, traveller. I'm Jaden Robinson. When I watched Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, my brain chemistry was altered forever. Never before had I seen something quite so marvellous in my entire life. A piece of comedy so groundbreaking that it may have made everything else I've seen in my life completely unfunny. Comedy movies and programs were very popular in the early 2000s, with films like Mean Girls and The 40-Year-Old Virgin being extremely successful. The difference between those and Garth Marenghi's Darkplace is that this one is actually fucking funny. And so I, your host, Jaden Robinson, am going to talk to you about why I love this show ever so much. I hope you enjoy. Well, I say enjoy.
I'm Garth Marenghi, author, dreamweaver, visionary, plus actor. You are about to enter the world of my imagination. You are entering my dark place.
Today I want to talk to you all about one of my favourite TV shows, nay, favourite pieces of media ever created. Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. Before we start talking about the show, I should probably introduce you guys to Garth Marenghi, the guy behind this whole thing. In case you haven't picked up on it, Garth Marenghi is not a real person. He is a character created by Matthew Holness. Essentially, Garth is a horror writer who is absolutely convinced he is a fucking genius. He thinks that everything that comes out of his mind is somehow a brand new idea that is going to change the course of horror as a genre forever. And this TV show, Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, is what he believes to be his absolute magnum opus, the true brainchild of an absolute prodigy. The problem is that it fucking sucks ass. Like, it is absolutely awful. But that right there is what is brilliant about this show, because in order to know how to make something terrible, you kind of have to know how to make something brilliant. So it's the intentional badness of the show that makes it so ridiculously unique and utterly, through and through, hysterical. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing, but if you follow along, it's not too hard to understand. Matthew Holness, the guy, the real guy, plays Garth Marenghi, the horror writer. However, within Garth Marenghi's Darkplace, not only does Garth play himself during excerpts of interviews with himself and the crew, but he also plays the in-universe character Rick Douglas MD. Essentially, Darkplace is this show that takes place in a hospital where the gates of hell are opened. I can't really explain how that happens, so I'm just going to show you the clip from the show real quick.
One night, Larry suggested we try and open the gates of hell right here in the canteen. I pleaded with him. I said no, don't, but he insisted. That night, we performed the rite and opened the gate. Halfway through, I went to the kitchen to fix us both a Coke float. But by the time I got back, he'd gone insane. Plus, he'd left the gate open and there was evil everywhere. I need to grab a shower.
I kind of love that, like, Channel 4 don't care about the copyright of the show anymore, because it means I can just show you guys a significant amount of the show. Because I feel like, while I'm going to put across to you guys why I love this so much, it is impossible to fully understand it without watching it for yourself. Of course, Garth isn't the only character in the show. You also have Richard Ayoade's Dean Lerner, who is possibly one of the most psychopathic characters in fiction, perhaps ever.
I had a cat once. I dropped a cipher on it. It was a write-off, so I stood on its head.
So within the show, Dean Lerner plays Thornton Reed, and there's a running joke in the show that Dean Lerner doesn't really know how to act, and pretty much did the show as a favour to Garth, and because he really believed in the concept. And this plays off to just absolutely incredible results while he's playing Thornton Reed, because again, like I said with how the show is executed, I think you have to really be a brilliant actor to understand how to intentionally play a character terribly, let alone a character played by a character.
I warned Garth. I said, I'm not an actor. And he said, I'll always remember this, that he didn't want an act, he wanted the truth. So here is Dean Lerner playing Thornton Reed, not putting on an act, but putting on the truth.
Listen up, ladies, we've got a situation. A little lass has just cracked her nut, and if she croaks, my ass is grass.
Then there's also Matt Berry, who for me is one of my personal favourite actors of all time, so the fact that he's in the show is just hysterical in itself. But he plays Todd Rivers, who is Garth's best friend and main co-star within the show, and within the show, he plays...
I'm Dr. Sanchez. You're a woman.
Sorry, that's just a brilliant line. And then finally you have Alice Lowe playing Madeline Wall, who in the show plays Liz Asher, and this is just a fascinating performance all round because she's the only member of the cast of the show that doesn't appear as her actor self within the interviews, and the implication... And again, this is where Garth's universe is just fascinating to me, because the implication within the show is that she mysteriously went missing at some point after the show concluded. But I've been to go and see one of Garth's live shows, and during a Q&A at the end, he basically insinuated that Dean Lerner had fucking murdered her. And I don't know, man. Like, I just think that's brilliant, because why? What the fuck? I should mention that Matthew Holness is one hell of a performer, man. Seriously, Garth's live shows are absolutely incredible. Me and Cole went, and we were just laughing in hysterics throughout the entire thing. Fun show about that fact, actually. He was doing a book signing immediately after, and we really wanted to meet him, and we noticed that everyone was leaving out of one door, and we said, well, everyone's going that way. It's like, we'd better meet him outside, quick. So we went outside the venue only to realise the reason everyone was queuing up was to get something signed by him. So I had to buy a signed book on eBay. I was pretty bummed about that. Anyway, getting back on course, I want to talk about the art of bad filmmaking. In the, you know, I touched on it earlier, but there is an execution to Darkplace that I don't think has been replicated by anything else because it's so ridiculously unique. You know, there's been things of similar genres, don't get me wrong, but this is a show where I don't think anything has attempted to replicate it because it is impossible to quite match the brilliant execution. I mean, first of all, you know, the concept of the show is that it was created in the 80s and was then canned by the studio because they saw how awful it was. It was only years later that they brought Garth back to narrate over it and show the show to people for the first time. So to replicate that 80s feel, they did actually shoot the show on film, which was extremely expensive for them. But it was so worth it because it adds to the genuine nature of it. You know, it makes you really believe this was a show that was made in the 80s. I think the world building is fascinating because it's so unbelievably real. It feels very believable. Everything you're seeing, while yes, it's comedic, it's played out with such sincerity that it's so easy to believe all of this did actually happen, that Garth is real, that the show was made, and it really didn't release because it's that bad. I mean, the show is just littered with hilarious mistakes. So, for example, sometimes they will just cut midway through a character is talking because they clearly got the line wrong.
Cool it, Sanchez, or you'll get a knuckle supper. Look, Douglas, you're an excellent doctor, but you're also a live wire maverick.
Other times there's terrible ADR. In fact, I'm convinced that most of Matt Berry's dialogue in this show is dubbed over.
Once.
Listen, when I first joined this hospital, I was strictly solo. You were the first real buddy I ever had.
There'll also just be clear mistakes made within the actual sets. I mean, one of the first things you see in the show was a cat be thrown onto the set because it hadn't walked on in time, and someone's hands are just in shot throwing the cat. The pacing is also just crazy. You know, it moves at such a rapid pace and doesn't let you think about anything, because there's no point in thinking when you're watching the show. Like, you'll be seeing one event transpire and then before you know it, we're on to the next thing. And it doesn't matter because Garth clearly didn't care to explain something. And there are times where this is more egregious and he does choose to explain it through the commentaries that are happening through the course of the episode. But even then, there are mistakes so huge that Garth clearly didn't bother to fix. I'm just going to show you this.
That which died in my arms out there should never have walked on God's earth.
Agreed, so what was it, Dag?
A blasphemy. A demented monkey man, half-formed and hell-bent on dragging us back into the Stone Age.
Could you give us a detailed explanation as to why all this happened? He was once a scientist who specialised in human evolution and had worked hard on it for many years. At some stage during his research, he discovered he was able to access mankind's atavistic tendencies and harness them for his own malevolent schemes. He developed a serum extracted from the gonads of gibbons, which when passed through the balls of chimps at light speed in a special atomic container could turn men into monkeys. He then set about contaminating our very own water supply. So I've had to develop an antidote, which is why everyone is now back to normal. Thankfully, he didn't succeed.
One of my favourite things about the show as well is the fact that the music is all very like synth. And if you pay attention during the opening credits of the show, you see a credit that says music based on melodies originally whistled by Garth Marenghi. Like, bro, like, whistled these things to himself and remembered all of this. Like, he just clearly has, like, a storage tank in his head. And when he's eventually gone to make the show, it's like, oh, it's good. I don't need music. Like, I can get this music made. I've already got, like, the tracks up here. Just fantastic. Nobody thinks like that. Again, it's not even the execution of the show. I mean, the plots themselves are just ridiculous. So there's an episode called Skipper the Eye Child, which is about a child eye that is born out of a man that Garth adopts and tries to save from being taken away by the hospital because he once had a child who was a grasshopper that died. There's an episode where Garth confesses that he's terrified of Scottish people, and then a mist comes that insinuates Scottish people are on their way, and then he has to fight off, but then make peace with the Scottish. One of my favourite episodes has got to be the one where Liz becomes telepathic because she's that sick of being taken advantage in the hospital. The conclusion to the episode is just that Liz is an irrational woman and they can continue to treat her like shit, and actually she's the one who needs to get over herself. Just wow. There's a monkey episode where everyone turns into monkeys. That's great. Mutant broccoli. There's an episode with mutant broccoli as well. So again, just between the crazy plots that, again, consider that this was made in the 80s, they're actually not too far from believable. This is something that probably would have gotten commissioned back in the 80s. As I say, so between the editing, between the ADR, between just the execution of it all, the genuine feel, and the terrible, like, plot lines, even the special effects. I mean, look at some of this.
They're dreaming about lipstick. Holy cow!
It's just so through and through genuine and made with heart. And I think, again, you couldn't get something like this now. Now that it's been made, you can't replicate it. It's simply that original. Alright, let's focus on the performances, okay? Because, again, it's difficult to talk about the performances of the show given that all the people involved are playing two characters. My favourite is Dean Lerner / Thornton Reed. This is perhaps one of the performances of all time. Like I mentioned at the start, it's impressive because Richard Ayoade, obviously, as we know now, he's become a very well-respected comedian. He is an incredible actor, and I think the ability to play Dean as this, like, very suave, like, producer type that he absolutely nails. It's like, you can tell that Dean thinks a lot of himself. And, this joke is mainly continued in the spin-off show, which I'm making a video on as well. But Dean clearly thinks that everyone in the world owes him something. So whenever anyone does him wrong, whether it be on purpose or not, he gets really, like, secretly pissed about it and does something awful to them. That is constantly implicated.
I punched one of the child actors who was working on set because they were rude about Garth's writing. And then, again, I think his character within the show, Thornton Reed, may give some of the best line deliveries in, I don't know, anything ever, perhaps?
You're acting like an ape! A wild ape!
And I mean, like I said, Matt Berry as well is one of my favourite actors, and he gives a performance in the show that is as confusing as anything he's ever done. It's like he has one of those voices that can just make anything funny naturally. But what I noticed is that he toned down sort of the "I'm Matt Berry" type thing for the in-person interviews. He plays that down a lot more, and sort of is this more... Out of all the cast, he's definitely the one who can see through Garth's craziness the most. He can definitely tell that the show didn't turn out what he thought it would be. But I think what makes this funnier is that, yes, he feels this way, and as a human being, he's probably the most normal of the bunch. But in the show, he clearly thinks he is an incredible actor who got put into this terrible show, but then you watch the show, and he's fucking shit as well. You know, it's like he is just as delusional as the rest of them and clearly can't clock that he just can't act for shit either.
Monkey bastard hands.
Again, all the characters in this are just so genius because they are all just as whack job as the other. And I think the funniest part about this is that the most grounded actor of all of the bunch is Madeline Wool, who we never even see get interviewed because she's dead. She got involved with this group of whack jobs and therefore ended up dead. But, you know, again, in the show, she's hardly great at acting either.
Who's this?
That's my son.
But again, I think most of this can be boiled down to the fact that Garth admits multiple times that, you know, he had to give her a lot of direction and stuff. So I think, you know, my headcanon at least is that it's entirely possible she may have done a genuinely decent performance and Garth kept telling her to redo it in a different way and made it worse every time. Because, yeah, her acting ability is not best represented in the show either.
When I came to, my head felt like a plum without the pip. Apparently I'd been asleep for a month, which is ages.
So all of this anti-acting, as I'll put it, is absolutely incredible. But again, the person who understands their character the most, and how could they not, is of course Matthew Holness as Garth Marenghi / Rick Douglas. Garth as a character, so Garth the guy who made the show, is one of the most inventive characters in comedy, I personally think. You know, he has this nature to him. You know, he has this, you know, look at people like Stephen King, for example. He has all of the makings of somebody like that who genuinely thinks they are a genius. The difference being is that Stephen King has made many well-respected, incredible works in the realm of horror. Garth Marenghi hasn't at all. You know, he, I've got his books as well, and I just now actually read Terratome for the first time. And, you know, Garth can't do anything right. And yet, the ideas are there, but executed in terrible ways. And you can tell that, like, you know, if you change the setting or change the characters in Garth's stories, or even mostly the execution, they might make for some decent horror stories. Just Garth is an idiot. I think that's what's evident. And so, out of all of them, the person who plays the character within the show that is most like the actor character that plays them is Garth / Douglas. Because Garth clearly sees Douglas as a representation of himself within the show. In fact, most of Garth's work have a self-insert in there. I mean, he's just so self-assured and overtly, like, over the top, almost painfully heroic that, you know, none of the other characters are to a degree. Garth is always the one to take the sacrifice or, you know, take a risk.
They work you too hard here. They should pay you a hero's wage.
You're a good kid.
It's just such a layered character, and I think that alone has to be respected so much. Nobody lives their character. Hell, obviously all of the other actors within the show have moved on to new things and have incredibly successful careers, but Matthew Holness hasn't done all that much outside of the Garth Marenghi character, and I wholeheartedly believe it's because he lives and breathes this character. You know, it's like Matthew, I don't recall Matthew ever doing an interview as Matthew Holness. You know, if you look at interviews online, he's always playing Garth. He even has a YouTube channel where he plays Garth Marenghi, and it's so believable. It's very easy to convince yourself that Garth Marenghi is a real guy that exists.
In America, it's a bit different. It's mainly sitting around a burning tire in some woods, isn't it? It's the campfire.
I don't know, man. I just think the world building here and the ability to set aside disbelief is sublime. So, I mean, you know, the series only ran for 6 episodes, and you know, there was a concept of a second season, but they had to cancel it because it was just so expensive to make. Again, because they wanted to shoot on film to keep the authenticity, it was very, very expensive to keep the show running. Plus, as well, you know, I don't think it was the best performing thing ever when it came out. It didn't do terribly or anything. People watched it. But it is only years later that this show has found its core audience, and I think I might understand why. People use the phrase ahead of its time a lot, to the point where I feel like it's lost its meaning. I feel like you could say pretty much anything was ahead of its time just because people have learnt to like it later than the people at the time. But this show, wholeheartedly, is one of the few things I can safely say I deeply believe was ahead of its time. The type of comedy in this show is something that wasn't fully explored back at its time. You know, it's like I mentioned in the intro, you know, early 2000s comedies were not like this at all. Everything was just dick, slurs, swearing, slapstick, shock humor. You know, that was really what was big during the early 2000s, and it worked. Everything that did that was immensely successful. This show is heavy satire, is just sheer stupidity for the sake of stupidity, but it's also genius. And I'm not trying to say that people back then were stupid and that, you know, I'm not trying to be one of those Rick and Morty fans who's like, people don't have enough IQ to understand Garth Marenghi's Darkplace. I would never, ever say that. But this show does take a degree of intelligence and knowledge of the media industry and television making and stuff to understand why it's so funny. I mean, hell, so much of the show is Americanized. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but like a lot of the language in the show is American language terminology. Yet it's a British show played by British actors, and it's evidently meant to parody American TV shows, especially American horror TV shows. You know, it's like, that is such a hidden detail that I think when you notice it, you can get a bigger appreciation for the show as a whole. And again, I just think, again, so bad it's good wasn't really a thing. Well, it was. It very much was. Sorry, I didn't mean that. What I mean is that, like, take, for example, The Room by Tommy Wiseau. I absolutely love this movie. But, you know, people clowned on it, and it was only a bit later that people, you know, the age of the internet, you know, going sort of self-aware, you know, it's like it was only when that happened that people started to adore The Room. And I think this is that vibe, you know, this is absolutely that genre of entertainment. So yeah, Darkplace honestly is just a love letter to outsider art and, you know, cheap television making. You know, you could not replicate something like this unless it was intentional. You know, you can't make a show like this accidentally anymore, because studios won't let you, you know. So to purposefully go out there and make something bad and be bold enough with it to the point where it circles back around to being ingenious is so hard to nail, and this show absolutely hit the bullseye on that. So look, I've spoken at length here, I've shown some clips, but I just hope I have convinced you to go and watch this show. The entire thing is on YouTube, by the way. Like I said, the copyright for it has gone very relaxed over the years. Go watch it, please. It is just an incredible time and will have you rolling on the floor if this type of comedy is your deal. So I hope you guys have enjoyed, and I hope you'll join me next time to talk about the obscure Dean Lerner spin-off that practically nobody knows about, but genuinely, parts of it may be funnier than Darkplace.
Good God, that's a lot! Well, that'll stop him.